He has been maligned, ridiculed, described as a maverick, condemned as a lunatic and a conspiracy theorist, and yet former Liberal MP and now independent for Hughes, Craig Kelly has stood steadfast in his conviction surrounding the efficacy and safety of the current COVID vaccines. Joining us today is Craig Kelly to discuss the recent events surrounding the AstraZeneca vaccine, its controversy and its links to blood clots in Australians. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, great to be with you, Natalie, although I'm not sure about that introduction. I have to take that on hold.
Well,
but you are right. I've copped the hiding down here from the media and from both sides of politics, simply because I've said in Australia, we should be applying the precautionary principle. We're very lucky here in Australia. Our rates of COVID infections are some of the lowest in the world. We were lucky. We've got our island continent. We closed our borders to China quickly. And during that first wave was the middle of our summer. So it didn't hit us as badly as it did a lot of the countries in the Northern Hemisphere. So we've been very fortunate having these low rates of COVID infection. So yeah, my argument has always been there's no great rush here in Australia to go around and start vaccinating everyone when this is an experimental vaccine, when we're not 100% sure what the short-term adverse consequences are. We have no idea what the medium consequences are and no idea what the long-term consequences are. Let's just sit back, take advantage of our unique position and learn all the mistakes that happen from overseas. But look, no, people have wanted to rush, panic rush, rush out the vaccine. And at least now I think that I've been vindicated.
Well, that was actually going to be my first question. Are you feeling vindicated? Because on January 13th, Chief Medical Officer Professor Michael Kelly said of the AstraZeneca vaccine, in terms of preventing deaths, it works 100% of the time. In terms of preventing severe illness, it works 100% of the time. And he also rejected calls to pause the rollout of the AstraZeneca vaccine. I mean, this is our Chief Medical Officer that when you were being attacked by all sorts of people in Australia, they were saying that you're not a doctor, you're not a chief medical officer, and all the people that you were bringing up in regards to who supported you, the answers often were, well, they're not a chief medical officer.
That's right. Look, this is not an opinion that I've just come to solely on my own. I've consulted experts from around the world over this COVID period because, if I'm going to go into our federal parliament and make decisions on this, I want to be informed as I possibly can. So I've spoken to many professors and experts, not only in Australia, in the US, also in Europe, to try and get their opinion and expertise of where we should be going on this. And I've had discussions with them about the vaccine. Look, I've always been very favourable to vaccines. I've actually got a great photograph, and I've been promoting the flu vaccines over the years, telling people, here's me having my flu vaccine with a shot with a doctor firing into my arm and promoting it. So the idea that I'm some sort of crazy anti-vaxxer is just not true. I just want to make sure that the evidence and the data is correct. Now, what really shocked me about some of these professors I spoke with overseas is how actually concerned they were about the vaccine rollout. That was one thing, but what concerned me even more was how frightened they were to make those views publicly. I was just quite actually shocked at both, but the fact that they were frightened to express their concerns, that was publicly, that was a great concern to me, that they couldn't speak freely about these issues. So there were two times that I've actually called for this vaccine rollout. Firstly, was just to say, let's not rush it in Australia. Let's take advantage. Let's learn from all the mistakes overseas. And the second time was when I think now 3 weeks ago, when we saw some data out of Germany. We had Germany, we had Denmark, we had Sweden, we had Finland, we had all those countries there saying, hang on a minute, we've now got some really grave concerns about the blood clotting on the AstraZeneca vaccine. I think we should suspend it. And Germany did. And Denmark did. And Sweden did, even though Sweden was the home of AstraZeneca. And then I said, look, surely if you've got these leading experts in these countries deciding in their own country where they actually have very high rates of COVID infection, that the risk is too great and they should be applying the precautionary principle. But surely in Australia, where we have almost zero rates of infection, that we should be doing exactly the same. Now that was 3 weeks ago, and now 3 weeks later they decide, oh well, maybe Kelly was right. More information's come through. More countries in Europe have suspended it, and we've done exactly the same. But one of the points is here, we've only actually suspended it for under 50s. So I'm at a loss. I would love to see the data that makes countries like now we know South Korea, the Philippines, with Spain, Italy, have all decided to suspend it for under 60-year-olds, but we've suspended it for under 50-year-olds. That just doesn't. Why? So if I'm between 50 and 60 here, it's okay for me to take AstraZeneca in Australia, but if I'm in Europe, in most of the countries in Europe, it's not okay. It's only for under 50s. That doesn't make logical sense about how they come up with those numbers, and I'd certainly like to see how they've done that.
Well, the other thing, watching from LA and watching this whole thing unfold, by my calculations, there are about 17 countries that have suspended the rollout or stopped it completely, Australia making it 18. But we were one of the last to actually suspend the AstraZeneca vaccine. Did the authorities genuinely not know, or did they know that this was happening and still choose to use Australians as guinea pigs?
Well, what happened, I think it was on the Wednesday night in Australia that information came through. And it was very clear first thing on Wednesday morning when you had those other countries suspending that Australia should have automatically fallen in line. Just, if you're going to err on this, you can afford to err on the safe side, especially in Australia. Look, our risk-benefit equation is completely different to that in Europe or the UK, where they've had high rates of death, high rates of infections. Maybe in Europe they can afford to take the risk. We don't need to do that. We should have been the very first country suspending it, and we should have been also doing it at the highest age bracket as well. So I just think our people were very slow off the mark. And I think one of the great problems that we have with this, you get a lot of bureaucrats that are making these decisions, and they then have a vested interest in the decisions they make today to reinforce the decisions they made a week ago were correct. It's just human nature that people don't like to admit that they've made a mistake, or you have to go back, when you get criticised in the media for backflipping or changing your opinion on issues. It's just human nature to do that. So one of the concerns I have to look at how you'd handle this in the future. Are you far better off to have a revolving panel of these chief medical officers? Because the reality is many people in the private field have far greater qualifications and experience. It sort of seems to be almost the B team gets into the government sectors, and the A team are out there in the private sector. So you get these chief medical officers, and we've seen in the USA how Fauci basically runs the show, and he's the main person speaking on television. It's been similar in Australia with our state chief medical officers. I think they have too much investment in their previous decisions, and it would be far better to have this, to maybe give them a tenure of maybe 30 days and to bring someone else to come in fresh, to let them look at the data. And then if they need to backtrack or change decisions, they can do so without having that personal vested interest in the previous decision.
Well, what about a panel of doctors who are on the front line? Because that's one of the sort of discussions that I've had with some of the doctors that I have interviewed on the program, in that they're saying, we understand the position that Dr. Fauci holds, but we are on the front line. We are dealing with these patients day in and day out. So are our politicians and our decision makers, are they complicit in any criminal action because it appears that they are using the Australians as guinea pigs?
Well, firstly, just on that, you make a very good point. It's like sort of the armchair general sitting behind the lines, sort of smoking a cigar and drinking a whiskey, where the sergeants on the front line seeing what's happening and being able to make decisions instantaneously. It's the similar thing. Surely these doctors, when you listen to people like Dr. Brian Tyson, Dr. George Fareed, that have treated over 4,000 patients, Dr. Pierre Corey treated also himself hundreds, if not thousands of patients. We're not listening to these guys, right? And you get these great experts, come in and make all these pronouncements, and you ask them how many. Oh, there was a great one, I think, during the Senate inquiry that Senator Johnson asked one of them, how many COVID patients have you treated? But this guy was sort of trying to, dismiss Pierre Corey, and the guy just had this sheepish look on his face and said, "Oh, none." And we've got to take more advice from the people who are actually working on the front lines. And that's in every aspect of life, especially here during a COVID panic. Now, when it comes to the legal responsibilities, there's a lot of questions on this. We have in Australia very strict workplace health and safety laws. And I've been concerned. I said this months and months ago, now almost 12 months ago, that I've been very concerned that some of the decisions that have been made could very likely be in breach of these work and health place safety laws, where they have put workers' lives at risk. Now, if you're forcing your staff to take a particular medical treatment, which we know is experimental, right, and something goes wrong, are you at risk? Are you liable? And likewise, if there's other treatments, like we know with ivermectin and with hydroxychloroquine, that the data shows is highly effective, if that's been denied to workers, is that also liable? So look, I think in the years to come, we could have it could be a lawyer's picnic involved in this as well.
Now, moving on, would you expect apologies from the likes of Alison Langdon and David Koch for their treatment of you through this issue? Because in February, there were some incredible interviews where you were told to pull your head in, amongst other things.
Yeah. Oh, look, they're morning TV breakfast hosts. They like to do a little bit of sensationalism. They've been left with egg on their face. In fact, probably, enough to make half a dozen omelettes, I think. They'll have to apologise to their viewers, because it's their viewers that they let down. We're in politicians, we've got to have thick skins and be able to, to cop the abuse. But when they go on and they basically say things that are false and mislead their viewers, that's where they need to apologise to.
Now, how irresponsible have the likes of Tanya Plibersek, Anthony Albanese, Scott Morrison, Greg Hunt, and every other leading politician in this country have they been on the issue? Because it seems they're more than happy to allow these experiments to continue on Australians, despite the known risks.
How long have we got to go on all that lot there? Look, firstly, I've been very disappointed with the opposition in this country, that's the Labor Party, because they're the ones that have been out there screaming, let's rush that. We should be rolling the vaccines out faster. We should be getting more people injected quicker. Now, the data is clear. If we had have listened to these people and we had rushed those vaccines out, there would be dozens of young Australians that would have had blood clots. The balance of probability is clear. They would have suffered blood clots, and some of them would be dead today. That's the reality of what would have happened if we had listened to these people and rushed it out, when I, as one of the rare people in the country, was saying, let's just go slow, let's learn in case there's any problems from overseas. Now, these people really need to pull their heads in, but unfortunately, it's been politics in Australia. Whoever can sort of scream the most alarmist, whoever can make the things cry the loudest about how bad everything is and how tough they want to be and how quick they want to make all these decisions. In the short term, politically, it seems to be effective, but I think the public will wake up to this and see these people for the damage that they've caused to the nation and the damage they would have caused if they had been able to proceed with their plans.
Now, should Professor Michael Kidd, Professor Michael Kelly, John Skerritt and other leading health officials, along with Anthony Albanese, resign?
Well, I think some of those leading medical bureaucrats that you talked about that have been on the record saying 100% safe, 100% effective, really have to consider their positions. Now, it's important going forward that whoever stands there next to the Prime Minister and makes these pronouncements has 100% credibility. Now, these people no longer have 100% credibility. They've told things that were false to the Australian public. They haven't applied the precautionary principle. How can the Australian public now, when these people get up and make other pronouncements about things being safe and effective, and people are going to take them with a grain of salt? And that's not good for the country. You want the chief medical officer to stand up and have their credibility absolutely unquestioned. But unfortunately, what's happened because of the panic and the rush and the bold pronouncements that they've made, they no longer have this in our country.
Well, I found that statement about 100% safe, 100% effective quite incredible, because the reality is there is not a single medication on the face of the earth that is 100% safe and effective.
Well, that's right. This is why I would like to see more transparency. Now, there's two ways you can go about this. You either do George Orwell's 1984, and ignorance is strength, and we keep the public in the dark, and we just keep chanting safe and effective, and everyone has to nod and not ask any questions. So that's one way of doing it, which I think is what you would expect in a totalitarian regime and will lead to a disaster. The other way is to be completely transparent. Put the data on the table. Let's see your numbers and see the workings of your numbers. So when you say the benefits outweigh the risks, show us your calculations. How did you work out what the benefits were? Now, we don't even know the efficacy. There's still a great question mark over the efficacy of these vaccines. Now, I've heard comments made in the UK, it's saved thousands and thousands of lives. Look how effective it is. But if you look at the UK's graphs of the first wave graph of the incline and the decline virtually mirrors the incline and the decline on the second wave. Now, the decline in the first wave came about without any vaccine. So how can you be so certain that your decline on the second wave, which is the same rate as the first wave without the vaccine, is caused by the vaccine? And we've seen other countries in Hungary, for example, that have a very high rollout of the vaccine, and we've seen their death rates have been increasing. We've seen, yes, Israel has done well, but so has South Africa, with very, very low rates of vaccine uptake. So the jury is still out on the efficacy of what these vaccines actually are. So what the benefits are, we're still very unsure about. There's still a lot of question marks over it. And what the risks are. Now, we saw that data put out by Cambridge University that said, I think it was 1.1 per 100,000 people under the age of 29, I think it's between 20 and 29. So it's for that age group, 1.1 in 100,000 were likely to get blood clots from the vaccine. Now, that's the data there. What's the data for that group? Right, that's likely, what's the benefit to that group? And remember that 1.1, that's only for blood clots. It's not for the other risks. And then you've got to add to that the long-term, the medium-term risks and the long-term risks. So there's still a lot of, still a lot of question marks over what this data is, but at least publish it. At least show us where you are. Now, there's going to be obviously some variation, but every day or every week as the data comes in, you can sharpen up where it is. Mm-hmm. Now, unless you have that data being publicly available to people, how can they have confidence in the decisions that are being made?
So a year ago, the issue of vaccine passports was raised, and many described those who raised them as conspiracy theorists. Now we see them becoming a very real conversation if those in power get their way. Now, are there any other MPs that you know of across the country that are wary of the vaccine passports for Australians?
Well, thankfully, there are. There's a good mate of mine, George Christensen, the member for Dawson, that has made some good public statements against them. And I'd expect a lot of our other members of parliament, when they see the detail of this and the risks involved, will come out strongly against us. Thankfully, we've got some great templates we can follow. We've got DeSantis over there, the governor of Florida, that's put a bill up. Now, my plan is to work with like-minded MPs. That bill I'm giving to the parliamentary drafters in Australia, We'll put it into language that's suitable for the Australian Parliament with a few changes. But my plan is to mirror that to what Governor DeSantis has put forward as a proposed bill, mirror that as close as we possibly can and introduce that in Australia as well. I remember these are domestic COVID vaccine passports, right? Now, firstly, remember, even if you have vaccinated, it doesn't give you, we don't know what the true rate of immunity that you do have. So you can still make the data at the moment. There's reports coming in from all over the place saying that even people who've been vaccinated and had two shots are still contracting COVID, still being COVID positive. So these vaccine passports are not 100% immunity to start with. But the idea that you should need some form of like a government issued document and papers to participate in normal everyday society, whether it's to go to a shopping centre or to jump on public transport or to go to a concert or a sporting event, this should offend every single Australian. Like, we don't do this for where there's vaccines for much more diseases with much more higher risk to people. Why do they want to do it for COVID? It just doesn't make sense. It's not compatible with a free democratic society, and it's contrary to those principles that our past generations have actually gone to war over to protect that we don't have. Now, I'm ready for this debate. I know a lot of us are ready for this debate. We've seen some great, strong politicians in the US standing up very strongly and being against that. They're setting the lead for us to follow here in Australia. And I hope that when the public understands what this is about, they'll be very strongly against these vaccine passports.
Craig, I feel like this conversation is far from over, but we will pick it up when the next round happens. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on the Informer.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks,
Natalie. Really, we're working. These are very important issues. These are very crucial times. There are very big decisions that are being made, by politicians around the world. And the best way that we can get them right is to have more debate, not less.
Absolutely. And on the Informer, we want nothing more than a good debate.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, Craig.
Yes.